Reagan Moore had built her empire on the power of words, sharp, calculated, merciless. But nothing prepared her for the moment she'd witness her mute daughter speak for the first time in 11 months. To a janitor. Through the pristine glass windows of Belhurst Academy, the city's most ruthless attorney stood frozen, watching her 7-year-old child whisper 2 words that would shatter everything she thought she knew. "See you tomorrow." And in that instant, Reagan realized the terrifying truth: she had become a stranger to her own daughter. "Mommy, please don't hurt Daddy." The scream tore through the penthouse like a siren, and Reagan Moore's hand froze mid-air, inches from her husband's face. She stood there, chest heaving, finger pointed like a weapon. Her 7-year-old daughter pressed against the hallway wall, with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, and terror written across her small face. That was 11 months ago. Ivy hadn't spoken since. Not a word, not a sound, not even a cry. And today, some janitor at her prep school claimed her daughter had whispered to him. Reagan's Louboutin heels clicked across the marble lobby of Belhurst Academy like gunshots. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her assistant droning on about tomorrow's depositions, but none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the 4 words the receptionist had just said. "Your daughter spoke today." "Tell them I'll call back," Reagan snapped, ending the call without waiting for confirmation. She spun toward the front desk where a young woman, Sarah Susan Reagan, never bothered learning these people's names, sat with a nervous smile plastered across her face. "My daughter hasn't spoken in 11 months. Reagan said, her voice cold and controlled. "Not to doctors, not to specialists, not to me. So I need you to be very specific about what you think you heard." The receptionist's smile wavered. I didn't hear it myself, Mrs. Moore, but Mr. Blake told me." "The janitor. He said Ivy whispered something to him by the music room." "The janitor." Reagan let the words hang there like an accusation. "Yes, ma'am, Mr. Blake. He's been here about 6 months. Very sweet." "Where is she?" "In the courtyard. With him, actually. They were just—" Reagan didn't wait for the rest. She cut through the lobby past the trophy cases and the oil paintings of dead white men who'd donated millions and shoved through the doors that led to the courtyard. The afternoon sun hit her face, but she barely noticed. Because there, right there beneath the ancient oak tree that probably cost more than most people made in a year, was her daughter, sitting cross-legged on the grass, next to a man in a gray maintenance uniform, laughing silently. Reagan's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen Ivy laugh. Couldn't remember the last time her daughter had looked that relaxed, that open, that alive. The man was showing her something, a small object in his palm, maybe a stone or a leaf, and Ivy was leaning in close, her little hand reaching out to touch it. He said something Reagan couldn't hear from this distance, and Ivy's face lit up with delight. Then her daughter's lips moved. Reagan's world tilted sideways. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw them form. Saw sound coming from her child's mouth for the first time in nearly a year. The janitor nodded, smiled a real smile, warm and unguarded, and said something back. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like her daughter wasn't broken. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Gabe." The words drifted across the courtyard on the breeze. Soft, clear, impossible. Reagan's vision tunneled. Her hands started shaking. That voice, Ivy's voice, it was higher than she remembered. Sweeter. She'd almost forgotten what it sounded like. She moved without thinking, crossing the grass in 6 long strides. The janitor saw her first. His expression shifted from gentle to cautious, and he stood quickly, brushing dirt from his knees. Up close, Reagan could see he was maybe late 30s, early 40s. Tired eyes, strong hands. The kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. Except Ivy wouldn't forget him. Ivy had spoken to him. "Mrs. Moore," he said carefully, "I was just—" "What did you do?" The question came out harder than Reagan intended, but she couldn't control her voice, couldn't control anything. Ivy had scrambled to her feet, and the light in her face had died the second she'd seen her mother. Now she looked small again, scared again, and Reagan hated herself for it. "I'm sorry." The janitor met her eyes without flinching. Most people flinched when Reagan Moore looked at them. "My daughter." Reagan's voice was shaking now. "What did you do to make her talk?" "Nothing," he said quietly. "She just did." Children don't just speak after 11 months of selective mutism and trauma therapy and psychiatric evaluations. "So I'll ask you one more time. What did you do?" Something flickered across his face. Not anger, something sadder. "I listened." Reagan stared at him. "That's it. You listened. That's it. Do you have any idea?" Reagan's voice was rising now, and she fought to control it. "Do you have any idea how many specialists I've taken her to? Speech therapists with 40 years of experience, child psychologists with walls covered in degrees, trauma counselors who've written textbooks, and you're telling me that you, a janitor, you succeeded where they all failed by just listening?" "Maybe that's why they failed," he said softly. The words hit Reagan like a slap. She felt her carefully constructed armor crack, felt something raw and ugly bubbling up from beneath it, and she hated this man for making her feel it. Hated that this nobody in his cheap uniform could stand there and make her feel like she'd failed. "Ivy," Reagan said tightly, "we're leaving. Now." Ivy didn't move. She was looking up at the janitor with wide, worried eyes. He smiled down at her, that same warm, uncomplicated smile, and nodded. "It's okay," he told her gently. "I'll see you Monday. Remember, promise." The word was barely a whisper, but it cut through Reagan like a knife. Promise. Only then did Ivy release her death grip on his pant leg and walk toward her mother. Reagan grabbed her hand too hard, she knew, but she couldn't seem to gentle her grip, and turned back toward the building. But before she could take a step, the janitor spoke again. "Mrs. Moore." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "She's a remarkable kid," he said quietly. "You should be really proud." Reagan didn't trust herself to answer. She just kept walking, Ivy's small hand trapped in hers, and tried to ignore the fact that her daughter kept looking back over her shoulder. Looking back at him. At a stranger who'd done what Reagan couldn't do in 11 months. Made her daughter feel safe enough to speak. The drive home should have been silent. It had been silent for 11 months. Reagan had gotten used to the quiet, had learned to fill it with NPR and conference calls and anything that would drown out the absence of her daughter's voice. But tonight, the silence felt different, heavier. Like Ivy was choosing not to speak rather than being unable to. Like she had words now, but was saving them for someone else. Reagan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When they pulled into the underground parking garage of their building, a glass tower in the financial district that had cost Reagan 3 years of 80-hour weeks, Ivy unbuckled herself without being asked and slid out of the car. No resistance, no questions, no. Just quiet compliance that made Reagan's chest ache. They rode the elevator to the 23rd floor in silence. Walked through the door of their penthouse in silence. Ivy went straight to her room without being told. Closing the door softly behind her, and Reagan stood in the middle of her pristine living room, feeling like a stranger in her own home. She poured herself a glass of wine, then another, then sat down at her laptop and typed 2 words into the search bar. Gabriel Blake. The results populated instantly. LinkedIn profile, Facebook account, several news articles from years ago. Reagan clicked on the first article, and her breath caught. Local therapist called the miracle worker after helping nonverbal children find their voices. The article was dated 8 years ago. The photo showed a younger version of the janitor she'd met today, same gentle eyes, same quiet intensity, but without the weight he carried now. He wore a suit in the picture, stood in front of a small clinic with a wooden sign that read Blake Speech and Language Center. Reagan scrolled down, her heart beating faster. Gabriel Blake, 35, has gained national recognition for his revolutionary approach to treating selective mutism and speech delays in children. "I don't believe in forcing speech," Blake explains in an interview. "I believe in creating space where speaking feels safe." His methods, which combine music therapy, Play therapy and what he calls radical listening have helped dozens of children who were previously deemed unreachable by traditional therapy. My son hadn't spoken in 2 years, says Jennifer Martinez, whose 8-year-old began talking after 6 weeks with Blake. Every doctor told us it was hopeless. Gabe proved them all wrong. Reagan clicked on another article, then another. Each one painted the same picture: a gifted therapist beloved by families renowned for his patience and his seemingly miraculous results. Awards. Speaking engagements. A waiting list 6 months long. And then, 3 years ago, the articles stopped. Reagan switched to Facebook. His profile was mostly private, but his profile picture was visible him with a woman. Pretty dark-haired, laughing at something off camera. Her hand was on his chest, and he was looking at her like she was his entire world. Reagan clicked on About. Married to Sarah Blake, 2014-2021. Her stomach dropped. She opened a new tab and searched the woman's name. Sarah Blake, 38, loses battle with throat cancer. The obituary was brief and heartbreaking. Beloved wife, talented artist, lost her voice in the final months of her illness. Donations in lieu of flowers to be made to cancer research. Service held at St. Augustine's Church. Reagan closed the laptop and stared at the dark screen, seeing her own reflection staring back. A celebrated therapist who specialized in giving voice to the voiceless. A man who'd lost his wife to an illness that stole her ability to speak. Now working as a janitor at an elite prep school where nobody knew who he was or what he'd lost. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Reagan drained her wine glass and went to check on Ivy. Her daughter was in bed, curled up with her stuffed rabbit eyes squeezed shut in a way that told Reagan she wasn't really asleep. The tension in her small shoulders, the rapid flutter of her eyelids, Reagan knew the signs of someone pretending. "Ivy?" she said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. No response. "I know you're awake, baby." Ivy's eyes opened slowly. They were red-rimmed. She'd been crying. Reagan felt something crack inside her chest. "I'm sorry if I scared you today. The words stuck in her throat. "I was surprised. I didn't expect, you haven't talked in so long, and then to hear that you spoke to a stranger." "He's not a stranger." Ivy's voice was barely above a whisper, but each word landed like a stone. "He's my friend." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Reagan reached out to brush hair from Ivy's forehead, but her daughter flinched. The movement was small, instinctive, but it cut deeper than any words could have. "Are you mad at him?" Ivy asked, her voice trembling. No, I'm not mad at Mr. Blake." "Then why did you yell?" "I didn't." Reagan stopped herself. She had yelled, or close enough. She'd been angry and scared and feeling things she didn't know how to name, and she'd taken it out on a man who'd done nothing wrong, who'd done everything right. "I was just surprised, Ivy. That's all." "Don't be mean to him." Ivy's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Mommy. He's nice. He doesn't make me feel bad." The words were a knife between Reagan's ribs. "And I do. I make you feel bad." Ivy didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The silence said everything. Reagan sat there for a long moment, fighting back tears of her own. "I never meant to," she whispered finally. "I never meant to make you feel anything but loved. But I know I messed up, Ivy. Her voice broke. "I know I was so busy fighting with your dad that I didn't see what it was doing to you. And then when you stopped talking, I got so scared that I made it worse. I pushed too hard. I tried to fix you when you weren't even broken." Ivy's lower lip trembled. "I'm not broken." "No, baby. No, you're perfect. You were just hurting, and I didn't know how to help." Reagan's tears were falling freely now. "But that janitor, Mr. Blake, he knew what you needed, and I'm so grateful to him for that. I really am." "Then don't make him go away," Ivy pleaded. "Like Daddy." Reagan's heart shattered. I won't. I promise. Do you promise? I promise. Ivy studied her mother's face for a long moment, then slowly reached out and wrapped her small arms around Reagan's neck. Reagan held her daughter and cried, really cried for the first time since the divorce, maybe for the first time in years. And Ivy just let her, offering the same patience and grace that a janitor named Gabriel Blake had somehow taught her. When Reagan finally pulled back, Ivy was looking at her with those wide, solemn eyes. Mom. Yeah, baby. Mr. Gabe says sad is just love that doesn't know where to go anymore. Reagan let out a broken laugh. Did he tell you that? No, but I heard him tell another kid once, and I thought maybe that's why you're sad all the time, because you still love Daddy, but he's not here anymore. The simple truth of it made Reagan's throat close up. When did you get so wise? Mr. Gabe says I've always been wise. I just forgot for a little while. Reagan pulled her daughter close again and held on tight. I think Mr. Gabe is pretty smart. He is, Ivy whispered against her shoulder. He knows lots of things. They stayed like that until Ivy finally fell asleep for real. This time her breathing evening out, her small body going limp with exhaustion. Reagan tucked her in carefully, kissed her forehead, and sat there in the dark for a long time. She thought about the man she'd met today. The janitor who used to be a miracle worker. The widower who'd lost everything and somehow still found a way to help a broken little girl feel whole again. And she thought about what he'd said to her in that courtyard. Maybe that's why they failed. He'd been talking about the specialists, about all those doctors and therapists with their degrees and their methods, but Reagan knew he'd really been talking about her, about the way she'd tried to fix Ivy with urgency and pressure and expectations. The way she'd made her daughter's silence about Reagan's failure instead of Ivy's pain. She'd been waiting for Ivy to talk, but she'd never just listened. Reagan didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything that had happened, everything she'd learned, everything she'd done wrong. And somewhere around 3 a.m, she made a decision. When Monday morning came, she called her assistant. Reschedule the Morrison deposition, she said. Mrs. Moore, that's our biggest case this quarter. We can't just... I said reschedule it. Tell them something came up, a family emergency. Is everything okay? No, Reagan said honestly, but it's going to be. She hung up before her assistant could argue and got Ivy ready for school. They drove to Bellhurst Academy in comfortable silence, and for the first time in months, Ivy didn't look anxious. She looked hopeful, like maybe today would be a good day. Reagan walked her daughter inside, but instead of just dropping her off and leaving like usual, she stayed. She told Ivy to go wait in the library, then went looking for the janitor. She found him in the east wing replacing a burned-out light fixture. His back was to her arms, raised as he worked, completely focused on the task. Reagan stood there for a moment watching him and wondered how many people walked past this man every day without seeing him, without knowing who he was or what he'd lost. Her heels announced her presence before she could speak. He turned and recognition flickered across his face. Recognition and something that might have been resignation. Mrs. Moore? Mr. Blake. He climbed down from the ladder and set his tools aside, waiting. His expression was carefully neutral, professional, guarded in a way it hadn't been with Ivy. Reagan had spent 20 years as an attorney. She knew how to read people, how to find weaknesses, how to break down walls with words. But standing here in front of this man, she found herself at a complete loss. You were a therapist, she said finally. Not a question, a statement of fact. Something shifted in his eyes. Yes. An award-winning therapist. You specialized in selective mutism, ran your own clinic, had a waiting list 6 months long. You've been doing your homework? My daughter spoke to you for the first time in 11 months. You're damn right I did my homework. Reagan paused. Why are you working here? I needed a job. You're lying. I'm simplifying. Then unsimplify it for me. Reagan said, her voice harder now. Because I don't understand how someone with your credentials, with your reputation, ends up cleaning bathrooms at a prep school. I don't understand why you're wasting your gifts pushing a mop around when there are dozens of kids out there who need you. So help me understand, Mr. Blake. Make it make sense. His jaw tightened. Why does it matter? Because my daughter trusts you, Reagan said, and her voice cracked on the words. Because in one afternoon you did what I couldn't do in 11 months. And I need to know why. I need to know what you did, what you said, what magic trick you pulled. There was no magic trick. Gabe interrupted, his voice sharp now. There was no trick at all. I just sat with her, and I listened. That's it. That's the whole story. Then why can't I do that? Reagan's voice broke completely now. Why can't I be enough for my own daughter? Why does she need you? The anger drained from Gabe's face. He looked at Reagan, really looked at her, and she saw something like understanding dawn in his eyes. Because you're her mom, he said gently. Because she loves you too much. Because every time she looks at you, she sees her own failure. She thinks she's broken because she stopped talking. She thinks she's disappointing you. And the weight of that, the fear of letting you down, it's crushing her. Reagan felt tears streaming down her face and didn't bother wiping them away. So what do I do? You stop waiting for her to talk, Gabe said. You stop treating her silence like a problem to be solved. You just be with her. No expectations, no pressure, just presence. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You just did it yesterday. Ivy told me about it this morning. He smiled slightly. She said you sat with her on the couch and didn't ask any questions. Said it was the first time in forever that she felt like she could just breathe. Reagan's chest tightened. She told you that? She did. What else did she tell you? Gabe hesitated, then said quietly, She told me she's scared. Of what? Of disappointing you. Of not being good enough. Of you leaving like her dad did. He paused. She said the night before she stopped talking, she heard you tell her father that you wished you'd never had a child because it ruined everything. That if you could go back and do it all differently, you would. Reagan felt the ground drop out from under her. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I didn't mean I was angry, I know, Gabe said gently. I'm sure you didn't mean it, but Ivy heard it. And in her 7-year-old brain, she decided that if she could just be quieter, smaller, less of a problem, maybe you wouldn't leave too. Reagan's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor right there in the hallway, her expensive suit wrinkling her carefully styled hair falling in her face, and she didn't care. Couldn't care about anything except the fact that she'd destroyed her daughter with words she barely remembered saying. I didn't mean it, she whispered. I was just so angry at Marcus, at the divorce, at everything falling apart, but I didn't mean Ivy is the best thing that ever happened to me. She's the only thing that matters. Then tell her that, Gabe said, crouching down beside her. Tell her every single day. And more importantly, show her. Not by fixing her, not by pushing her to talk, but by just being there, by loving her exactly as she is right now. What if it's too late? What if I've already damaged her too much? It's never too late. Gabe's voice was firm. She's 7 years old. She's resilient. And she loves you so much, Mrs. Moore. So much. She just needs to know that you love her back unconditionally, silence and all. Reagan looked up at him through her tears. How do you know all this? How are you so good at this when I'm so bad at it? Something painful flashed across his face. Because I failed at it once, he said quietly. And I promised myself I'd never fail another kid the same way. Your wife. He nodded slowly. Sarah. She was a painter, talked constantly about colors and light and the way the world looked through her eyes. And then the cancer took her voice bit by bit and He stopped, swallowed hard, I was so focused on finding treatments, on fixing her, on making her better, that I forgot to just be with her. I kept pushing her to talk, to communicate, to fight. And in the end, she died feeling like she'd failed me because she couldn't speak anymore. I'm so sorry, Reagan whispered. Me too. Gabe's eyes were distant now, lost in memory. After she died, I tried to keep working. Thought maybe helping other people's kids would help me. But every time a parent looked at me with hope in their eyes, every time a child struggled to form words, all I could see was her. So I closed the clinic, walked away from everything, and I took the first job I could find that didn't require me to save anyone. But you're saving Ivy. No, Gabe said firmly. I'm not saving her. I'm just giving her space to save herself. There's a difference. Reagan let that sink in. Then slowly she pushed herself to her feet. Gabe stood too, watching her carefully. Thank you, Reagan said, for being honest with me, for helping my daughter, for not giving up on her when I... Her voice broke again. When I didn't know how to help. She doesn't need me to not give up on her, Gabe said gently. She needs you to not give up on yourself. The words hit Reagan like a physical blow. But before she could respond, a voice cut through the hallway. Mr. Blake! They both turned. A woman in a navy suit was striding toward them. Margaret Winters, the school's headmistress. Her expression was tight professional, but Reagan could read the concern beneath it. Mrs. Winters, Gabe said carefully. Is everything all right? I need to speak with you, privately. Margaret's eyes flicked to Reagan. Mrs. Moore, I didn't realize you were here. Is there something I can help you with? Reagan's attorney instincts kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, could see it in the way Margaret was standing, too rigid, too formal. Actually, I was just speaking with Mr. Blake about my daughter, Reagan said smoothly. Is there a problem? That's what I need to discuss with him. Margaret said, her tone brooking no argument. Mr. Blake, my office. Now please. Gabe's expression didn't change, but Reagan saw his shoulders tense. Of course. As he turned to follow Margaret, Reagan made a split-second decision. I'm coming with you, she said. Margaret stopped. Mrs. Moore, this doesn't concern... If it concerns Mr. Blake, and it involves my daughter speaking to him, then it absolutely concerns me. Reagan's voice was pure steel now, her lawyer mask sliding into place. So, unless you want me to make a very uncomfortable phone call to the Board of Trustees, I suggest you let me join this conversation. Margaret's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. Fine. They walked to the administration office in tense silence. Reagan's mind was racing. Something had happened. Someone had complained. She knew how these things went. A janitor getting too close to a student, concerned parents raising questions, the school covering its ass. And she knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't going to let them destroy this man who'd given her daughter back her voice. Margaret closed the office door behind them and gestured for them to sit. Gabe sat. Reagan remained standing. What's this about? Reagan asked before Margaret could speak. Margaret took a breath. We received a complaint this morning from Patricia Henderson. Her daughter Sophia is in Ivy's class. Reagan knew Patricia Henderson. Wealthy, bored, the kind of woman who made problems her hobby. What kind of complaint? Reagan's voice was dangerously quiet. Patricia is concerned about the amount of time Mr. Blake has been spending with the children, particularly the girls. She feels it's inappropriate. The word hung in the air like poison. Gabe's face had gone pale, but his voice was steady when he spoke. I'm a maintenance worker. I'm around children because I work at a school. I've never been inappropriate with anyone. I'm not accusing you. Yes, you are, Reagan cut in sharply. That's exactly what you're doing. Patricia Henderson saw a janitor being kind to children and decided to make it into something ugly because she has nothing better to do with her miserable life. Mrs. Moore, I understand you're upset, but... Upset? Reagan let out a harsh laugh. I'm not upset, Mrs. Winters. I'm furious. Do you have any idea who this man is? Do you know his background? Margaret blinked. He's our maintenance worker. His background check was clean. He's Gabriel Blake. Reagan interrupted. One of the most respected speech therapists in the country. He's helped dozens of nonverbal children find their voices. And my daughter, who hasn't spoken in 11 months, spoke to him last week because he's the first person who made her feel safe enough to try. Margaret's expression shifted from defensive to confused. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, because you hired him to clean your school and never bothered to look deeper. Reagan turned to Gabe. Why didn't you tell them? Because it doesn't matter, Gabe said quietly. That's not who I am anymore. It absolutely matters, Reagan shot back. Then to Margaret. You want to fire him over Patricia Henderson's complaint, fine. But you should know that if you do, I will personally make sure every parent in this school knows that you fired a qualified therapist for being kind to children. And I will sue you and Patricia Henderson for defamation. And I will win. Margaret held up her hands. Nobody said anything about firing anyone. I just needed to address the complaint. Then address it by telling Patricia Henderson to mind her own business, Reagan said coldly. Or better yet, tell her that if she has concerns about her daughter's welfare, she should try spending less time at the country club and more time actually parenting. Mrs. Moore, are we done here? Margaret looked between Reagan and Gabe, clearly flustered. Yes, I suppose we are. Mr. Blake, you're free to go, but please be mindful of what? Reagan challenged. Of being kind, of listening to children, of doing his job with compassion. Margaret's face reddened. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I think what Mrs. Winters is trying to say, Gabe interjected quietly, standing up, is that I should be more aware of how my interactions might be perceived. And she's right. I should be. Gabe, Reagan started, but he shook his head. It's okay. I understand. He looked at Margaret. I'll be more careful. Is there anything else? No. That's all. Thank you for understanding. Gabe nodded and left the office. Reagan waited until he was gone, then turned back to Margaret. If you get another complaint like this, you call me first, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Because that man is helping my daughter in ways I never could. And if Patricia Henderson or anyone else tries to take that away from her, they're going to have to go through me first. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Mrs. Moore. Good. Reagan walked out of the office and went to find Ivy in the library. Her daughter looked up from her book, and Reagan could see the question in her eyes. Everything's okay, Reagan said softly, sitting down beside her. Mr. Gabe isn't going anywhere. Ivy's whole body relaxed. You promise? I promise, Reagan said, using her daughter's phrase. And for the first time in 11 months, Ivy smiled at her. A real smile, full of hope and trust and love. And Reagan knew in that moment that she would burn the entire world down before she let anyone hurt this child again. Before she let anyone take away the person who'd given her daughter back her voice. Before she let fear and other people's ugly opinions steal the one thing that was finally working. She sat with Ivy in the library for another 20 minutes, just being present, and when it was finally time to leave, her daughter reached for her hand without hesitation. Mom? Yeah, baby. I'm glad you're my mom. Reagan's eyes filled with tears. I'm glad you're my daughter. And for the first time in 11 months, it felt like the truth. As they walked out of the school together, Reagan looked back and saw Gabe watching them from down the hall. He raised a hand in a small wave. Ivy waved back enthusiastically, and Reagan wondered how she was going to protect this man from the Patricia Hendersons of the world, how she was going to keep him safe while he helped her daughter heal. But more than that, she wondered why a part of her wanted to protect him, not just for Ivy's sake, but for her own. Because something about Gabriel Blake This broken, grieving janitor with kind eyes and gentle hands made Reagan feel like maybe she wasn't as lost as she thought. Like maybe, just maybe, she could learn to listen too. Like maybe silence wasn't something to fear, it was something to understand. Reagan didn't go to work that day, or the next. She called in sick for the first time in 6 years, and her assistant sounded so shocked she almost dropped the phone. But Reagan didn't care. She'd spent 11 months prioritizing everything except what mattered, and she was done. She spent Tuesday morning sitting on the floor of Ivy's room while her daughter played with her dolls. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to start conversations, just sat there present and quiet and watched her child exist without pressure. Around noon, Ivy looked up from her dolls and said, "You're being weird." Reagan laughed, actually laughed. "Am I? You're just sitting there. Is that weird?" Ivy considered this. "Kinda. You're always doing stuff. Working or talking on the phone or cleaning things that aren't even dirty." The observation cut deeper than it should have. "I'm trying something new. Is it okay if I just sit here with you?" "I guess." Ivy went back to her dolls, but Reagan caught the smallest hint of a smile. By Wednesday, Ivy had started talking more. Not a lot, just little comments here and there. "Can I have juice?" And "This doll is sad," and "I like your shirt." Each word felt like a miracle, but Reagan forced herself to treat them like they were normal, like her daughter had been talking all along. Thursday morning, as they were getting ready for school, Ivy said something that made Reagan's hands freeze on the hairbrush. "Can we invite Mr. Gabe for dinner?" Reagan met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. "You want Mr. Gabe to come to our house?" "Yeah, to say thank you, for being nice." "I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart." Which is how Reagan found herself standing in the school hallway that afternoon, watching Gabe fix a broken water fountain, trying to figure out how to ask a janitor to dinner without making it weird. "Mr. Blake." He looked up, and something flickered across his face when he saw her. Surprise, maybe, or wariness. "Mrs. Moore, is everything all right with Ivy?" "She's fine. Great, actually. She's been talking more at home." Reagan paused. "Because of you." "Because of her," Gabe corrected gently. "I didn't do anything." "You keep saying that, but we both know it's not true." Reagan took a breath. "Listen, Ivy wanted me to ask you something. She wants to know if you'd come to dinner, at our place, this weekend maybe, as a thank you." Gabe's expression shifted to something Reagan couldn't quite read. "That's very kind, but—" "Please," Reagan interrupted. "She's been asking about it all day. I know it's probably weird. I know you're just trying to do your job and I keep inserting myself into it. But she really wants this, and honestly—" Reagan's voice softened. "So do I." Gabe studied her for a long moment. "Why? Why what? Why do you want me there? Really?" Reagan could have given him a dozen safe answers. For Ivy, to thank him properly, to understand his methods better. But standing there in the fluorescent hallway light, she found herself telling the truth. "Because you're the only person who's been honest with me in months, maybe years. And I'm tired of being around people who tell me what they think I want to hear." Something in Gabe's expression softened. "Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll come to dinner. But only if you promise not to make it fancy. I don't own a suit anymore." Reagan smiled. "Trust me, after this week, fancy is the last thing I'm interested in." They settled on Saturday at 6. Reagan spent Friday having a minor panic attack about it, cleaning an already clean apartment, and then feeling guilty about cleaning because wasn't that exactly the kind of behavior Ivy had called out? She ordered groceries, then canceled the order and ordered pizza instead, then canceled that too, and decided she'd just cook something simple. By Saturday afternoon, she was a mess. "Mom, you're being weird again," Ivy observed from the couch where she was reading a book about horses. "I'm not being weird. I'm being prepared." You've changed your shirt 3 times. Reagan looked down at her current outfit, jeans and a simple sweater. I'm just trying to be comfortable. You're trying too hard, Ivy said matter-of-factly. Mr. Gabe doesn't care what you wear. How do you know that? Because he told me once that people who judge you by your clothes aren't worth knowing anyway. Reagan sat down next to her daughter. He's pretty smart, isn't he? Yeah, Ivy looked up at her. Are you nervous? A little. Why? I don't know. I guess I want him to see that we're okay. That you're okay. That I'm not a complete disaster as a mom. Ivy set down her book and climbed into Reagan's lap, something she hadn't done in months. You're not a disaster, Mom. You're just learning. Reagan held her daughter close and wondered when 7-year-olds had gotten so wise. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Gabe stood in the hallway holding a small bouquet of flowers and looking uncomfortable in jeans and a button-down shirt. These are for you, he said, handing Reagan the flowers. Or for Ivy. Or for both of you. I wasn't sure about the protocol here. There's no protocol, Reagan said, taking the flowers. They were simple daisies and carnations, nothing fancy. They were perfect. Come in. Ivy appeared behind Reagan like a shot, her face lighting up. Mr. Gabe? Hey, Ivy. Gabe crouched down to her level. How was your week? Good. I talked to Mom a lot, and I told my dolls about you. All good things, I hope. Mostly. Ivy grinned a real mischievous grin that made Reagan's heart soar. I told them you're bad at fixing the fountain in the East Hall because it's still broken. Gabe laughed. That fountain has been broken since before I started working here. I'm pretty sure it's possessed. Can things be possessed? In my experience, absolutely. They moved into the living room, and Reagan watched Gabe take in the space. She tried to see it through his eyes, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furniture, the abstract art on the walls that cost more than most people made in a year. It all suddenly felt cold and empty. Nice place, Gabe said, but there was something careful in his tone. It's too big, Reagan heard herself say. I bought it right after the divorce because I wanted to prove I could. But mostly, it just echoes. Gabe met her eyes, and she saw understanding there. I know that feeling. After Sarah died, I stayed in our house for 6 months. 3 bedrooms, 2 people, then 1 person, then just echoes. I finally sold it and moved into a studio apartment. Turns out I didn't need much space. Just enough room to not feel so alone. The honesty of it made Reagan's throat tight. I keep telling myself I'll downsize. Find something cozier. But then I think about what people would say. Other attorneys, clients, Ivy's school parents. Like I'm admitting defeat or something. Defeat would be staying somewhere that makes you miserable just because other people expect it. Gabe said quietly. Ivy tugged on Gabe's hand. Come see my room. Ivy let Mr. Gabe breathe for a second. Reagan started, but Gabe was already following Ivy down the hall. Reagan heard them talking. Ivy's voice excited and clear, Gabe's low and warm. She went to the kitchen and pulled the lasagna from the oven, her hands shaking slightly. This was just dinner. Just a simple dinner with her daughter's friend. So why did it feel like something more? When they came back, Ivy was chattering away about her doll collection and her favorite books, and how she wanted to learn piano, but Mom was always too busy to find a teacher. I used to play, Gabe said as they sat down at the table. Not well, but enough to fake it. Really? Ivy's eyes went wide. Can you teach me? Ivy, Mr. Gabe is already doing enough for us, Reagan said quickly. We can't ask him to. I'd like to, Gabe interrupted. If it's okay with your mom. The school has a piano in the music room. We could do 20 minutes after school a couple days a week. Really? Ivy looked at Reagan with such hope that there was no way to say no. Really, Reagan said. But only if Mr. Gabe is sure, and only if you promise to practice. I promise, promise, Dinner was easier than Reagan expected. Gabe asked Ivy about school, about her dolls, about what she wanted to be when she grew up. And Ivy answered him with an openness Reagan hadn't seen in months. No hesitation, no fear. Just a kid being a kid. At one point, Ivy said, "My dad used to live here, but he doesn't anymore because he and Mom fought too much." Reagan froze her fork halfway to her mouth. They'd never talked about the divorce directly, never put words to what Ivy had witnessed. "That must have been scary," Gabe said gently. "Hearing them fight." "It was really loud," Ivy said, her voice getting quieter. "And one time I heard Mom say she wished I was never born because I ruined everything. And then the next day I couldn't talk anymore. My voice just stopped." Reagan's fork clattered to her plate. "Ivy, I know you didn't mean it," Ivy interrupted, looking at her mother. "Mr. Gabe explained it to me. He said sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean when they're really sad or angry, and that words can hurt even when people don't want them to. Right, Mr. Gabe?" Gabe's eyes were on Reagan, and she saw something like compassion there. "That's right. Sometimes the worst thing about words is that we can't take them back. Even when we want to more than anything." "I would take them back," Reagan whispered, tears streaming down her face now. "Ivy, if I could take back every cruel thing I said every time I made you feel small or unwanted, or like you were a burden, I would. In a heartbeat. Because you are the best thing that ever happened to me. The only thing that matters. And I'm so sorry I made you believe anything different." Ivy got up from her chair and climbed into Reagan's lap, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. "It's okay, Mommy. I believe you now." They stayed like that for a long moment, Reagan holding her daughter and crying into her hair, while Gabe sat quietly across the table, letting them have their moment. When Reagan finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart during dinner." "Don't apologize," Gabe said. "That was important. For both of you." After dinner, they moved to the living room. Ivy wanted to show Gabe a puzzle she was working on, and Reagan watched them sit on the floor together, heads bent over the scattered pieces. The easy way Gabe talked to her daughter. The way Ivy lit up around him. The way he made everything seem simple and safe. "Can I ask you something?" Reagan said suddenly. Gabe looked up. "Of course." "How do you do it? How do you make her feel so safe when her own mother couldn't do that for 11 months? Gabe was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he said, "It's not about what I do. It's about what I don't do. I don't have expectations of her. I don't need her to be anything other than what she is. And maybe that's easier for me because I'm not her parent. I don't have the weight of worrying about her future, or fixing her problems, or making sure she turns out okay. I can just be present with her exactly as she is right now. But I'm her mother. I should be able to do that." "You are doing that," Gabe said gently. "You've been doing it all week. That's why she's talking more, why she's more open. You're learning, Reagan, and that's all any parent can do." The use of her first name sent a small shock through her. "When did I stop being Mrs. Moore?" "When you cried in front of me about your daughter," Gabe said with a slight smile. "Formality doesn't really work after that." "Fair enough." Reagan paused. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I'm terrified, every day, that I'm going to mess this up, that I've already messed it up too much to fix, that one day Ivy's going to be an adult and she's going to look back and remember me as the mother who made her stop talking. And I don't know how to live with that." "Then don't," Gabe said simply. "Don't live in that future that hasn't happened yet. Just be here now, with her, doing better than you did yesterday. That's enough." "Is it?" "It has to be, because that's all any of us can do." Ivy looked up from her puzzle. "Mr. Gabe, do you have kids?" The question hung in the air. Gabe's expression shifted, and Reagan saw pain flash across his face before he could hide it. "No," he said quietly. "We wanted them. But we ran out of time. Because your wife died. Ivy. Reagan started, but Gabe shook his head. It's okay. He looked at Ivy. Yeah, because my wife died. We were going to start trying after she finished this big art project she was working on. But then she got sick. And by the time we realized how sick it was, too late. Do you miss her? Every single day. I miss my dad, Ivy said softly, even though he made Mom sad. Is that weird? Not even a little bit, Gabe said. You can miss someone and still be angry at them. You can love someone and still wish they'd done things differently. People are complicated like that. Mr. Gabe, yeah. Do you think your wife would be proud of you for helping kids like me? Gabe's eyes filled with tears. I hope so. I really hope so. Ivy stood up and walked over to him, then wrapped her small arms around his neck in a hug that made Reagan's heart crack wide open. Gabe hugged her back, and Reagan saw his shoulders shake slightly. When Ivy pulled back, she said seriously, I think she would be. Because you're really good at making people feel less alone. After Ivy went to bed, Reagan and Gabe sat in the living room nursing glasses of wine. The city glittered below them, through the massive windows, and Reagan thought about how she used to love this view. Used to feel powerful looking down at all those lights. Now it just made her feel disconnected. Thank you for tonight, Reagan said. For being honest with Ivy, about your wife, about everything. She asked. I wasn't going to lie. Most people would have changed the subject or given some sanitized version of the truth. Most people are afraid of making kids uncomfortable. But kids can handle truth. They're actually better at it than adults most of the time. Reagan took a sip of wine. Can I ask what happened with your wife? You don't have to answer if... Throat cancer, Gabe said quietly. By the time they caught it, it had already spread. She had surgery, radiation, chemo, the whole nightmare. And bit by bit it took her voice. First it was just hoarse, then painful, then gone. She had to use a whiteboard to communicate for the last 3 months of her life. That must have been unbearable. For both of you. The worst part wasn't the silence, Gabe said, staring into his wine glass. It was watching her feel like she was failing, like she was letting me down by not being able to talk. I'd come home from work from helping nonverbal kids learn to speak, and she'd apologize to me. Apologize for not being able to tell me about her day or say she loved me out loud. And I didn't know how to tell her that her silence was breaking my heart, not because I needed her to talk, but because I knew how much it was hurting her. Reagan felt tears sliding down her face. I'm so sorry. After she died, I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit across from parents desperate for their kids to speak. Couldn't pretend I had answers. Because I'd failed the one person I loved most in the world. What kind of miracle worker can't help his own wife? You didn't fail her, Reagan said firmly. Cancer failed her. The universe failed her. But you loved her. You were there. That matters. Does it? Gabe's voice was raw. Because in the end, she died feeling broken. And I was the one who was supposed to fix broken things. Nobody could have fixed that, Reagan said. And she didn't need fixing. She needed you. And it sounds like you gave her that. Gabe was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I scattered her ashes at the beach. She loved the ocean. Said it was the one place that was louder than she was. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. After the service, I went home and I sat in our house for 6 months barely moving. My practice called. Families called. Everyone wanted to know when I was coming back. And I couldn't tell them I was never coming back. That I was done saving people. So I just disappeared. Sold everything. Changed my number. Took the first job I found that didn't require me to be anyone important. But you are important, Reagan said. Look what you've done for Ivy. For me. I didn't do anything. Stop saying that. Reagan said, her voice sharp now. Stop diminishing what you've done. You gave my daughter her voice back. You taught me how to listen. You made me see that I was so busy trying to fix everything that I was breaking the only thing that mattered. So stop telling me you didn't do anything, because that's bullshit." Gabe looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. Then slowly he smiled. "Has anyone ever told you you're very intense?" "All the time. Usually right before they fire me as their attorney." "Well, I'm not firing you." "Good. Because I'm not done with you yet." The words hung between them, and Reagan realized too late how they sounded. But before she could backtrack, Gabe said quietly, "What does that mean?" "I don't know," Reagan admitted. "I just know that you've helped my daughter more in 2 weeks than anyone else did in 11 months. And I want to understand how. I want to learn how to be what she needs. And I think maybe you're the only person who can teach me that." "Reagan, I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm barely functional most days." "You're more functional than you think, and you're helping me, whether you realize it or not." Gabe set down his wine glass and leaned back against the couch. "You know what the hardest part of losing Sarah was?" "What?" "Realizing that I'd built my entire identity around helping people, around being the guy who fixed things. And when I couldn't fix her, when I had to just sit with her in her silence and her pain and her fear, I didn't know how to be. I felt useless. And after she died, I realized I'd been useless all along. Because fixing people isn't the same as loving them. And I'd spent so much time teaching silence to speak that I forgot how to just listen." "That's what you're doing now," Reagan said softly. "With Ivy, with me. You're listening, and it matters more than you know." "Maybe," Gabe said. "Or maybe I'm just trying to make up for everything I failed to do before." "Maybe it's both," Reagan offered. "Maybe you're healing while you're helping. Maybe that's okay." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights twinkling below them, and Reagan thought about how strange life was. 2 weeks ago, she'd been furious at this man, suspicious, defensive. Now she was sitting with him in her living room, sharing wine and stories and truths she hadn't told anyone else. Now she was starting to understand that maybe the person who needed help wasn't just Ivy. Maybe it was her too. "I should go," Gabe said eventually. "It's getting late." "Stay." The word was out before Reagan could stop it. "I mean, just for a little while longer. Ivy would be sad if you left before she woke up to say goodbye." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. But Gabe nodded anyway. "Okay, just a little while longer." And Reagan thought maybe, just maybe, this was what healing felt like. Not a grand revelation or a dramatic breakthrough. Just two broken people sitting together in the quiet, learning that silence didn't have to be lonely. That sometimes it could be exactly what you needed. Gabe fell asleep on the couch around midnight. Reagan found him there when she came back from checking on Ivy one last time, his head tilted back, breathing deep and even. She stood there for a moment watching him and realized this was the first time she'd seen his face completely relaxed. No tension around his eyes, no tightness in his jaw, just peace. She grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and draped it over him carefully, then went to her own room. But sleep didn't come. She lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything he'd told her. About his wife. About his guilt. About how he'd spent 3 years punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of silence. Not the suffocating kind that had filled her apartment for 11 months. The comfortable kind. The kind that felt like home. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ivy's laughter. Reagan pulled on a robe and padded into the kitchen to find Gabe making pancakes, while Ivy sat on the counter still in her pajamas, chattering away about a dream she'd had about flying horses. "Morning," Gabe said when he noticed Reagan. "Hope you don't mind. Ivy woke me up at 6 demanding breakfast." "I did not demand," Ivy protested. "I asked nicely. You poked me in the face and said, 'Food, now.' That's asking nicely." Reagan laughed, and the sound surprised her. When was the last time she'd laughed before 9 in the morning? "You didn't have to make breakfast. I wanted to. Consider it payment for the couch." Gabe flipped a pancake expertly. "Besides, Ivy informed me that you can't cook. Her words, not mine." Mom burns everything, Ivy confirmed cheerfully. Even toast. I don't burn everything, Reagan protested. Just most things. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen island, and Reagan watched her daughter come alive in a way she hadn't seen since before the divorce. Ivy told stories, asked questions, giggled at Gabe's terrible jokes. And Gabe matched her energy perfectly, never talking down to her, never dismissing her thoughts as childish. So, when's my first piano lesson? Ivy asked between bites of pancake. Whenever you want, Gabe said. We could start tomorrow after school if you're free. I'm free, Mom. I'm free tomorrow, right? You're free. Reagan confirmed, then looked at Gabe. Are you sure about this? I don't want to take advantage. You're not, Gabe interrupted gently. I want to do this. It's been a long time since I've had something to look forward to. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Reagan met his eyes and saw something there that made her chest tight. Gratitude, maybe, or hope, or something she was afraid to name. After breakfast, Gabe left with promises to see Ivy at school Monday. Reagan spent the rest of Sunday doing something she never did, nothing. She and Ivy stayed in their pajamas, watched movies, ordered Chinese food, and just existed together without agenda or pressure. Mom, Ivy said that night as Reagan was tucking her in. Yeah, baby. I like when Mr. Gabe is here. It feels like we're a family again, not the old family, a different one. Is that weird? Reagan's throat tightened. No, sweetheart. That's not weird at all. Do you think he likes being here? I think he does. Good. Ivy snuggled deeper into her covers. I don't want him to be lonely anymore. Reagan kissed her daughter's forehead and went to her own room, Ivy's words echoing in her mind. A different family, not the old one, a new one. And the terrifying part was how much Reagan wanted that too. Monday started normal enough. Reagan dropped Ivy at school, went to work, buried herself in depositions and case files. But around 2 in the afternoon, her assistant buzzed her office. Mrs. Moore? There's a Margaret Winters on line 2. She says it's urgent. Reagan's stomach dropped. She picked up the phone. Mrs. Winters. Mrs. Moore. I'm sorry to bother you at work, but we have a situation. Margaret's voice was tight, professional. Patricia Henderson has filed a formal complaint with the school board about Mr. Blake. What kind of complaint? She's claiming inappropriate contact with students. She's demanding we terminate him immediately, and she's threatening to pull her daughter from the school if we don't comply. She's also contacted several other parents, and they're planning to attend tomorrow night's emergency board meeting. Reagan's vision went red. She's doing this because she's bored and vindictive, and she needs a hobby. Be that as it may, the board is taking it seriously. There will be a hearing tomorrow at 7. Mr. Blake has been suspended pending the investigation. You suspended him. Reagan's voice was dangerously quiet. Based on the word of Patricia Henderson, we had no choice. The board insisted. I'll be at that hearing. Reagan interrupted. And Mrs. Winters, you might want to warn the board that I'm coming, because I'm about to make this very uncomfortable for everyone involved. She hung up before Margaret could respond, then immediately called Gabe's number. It rang 4 times before he answered. Reagan, they suspended you. Silence. Then, I know. Margaret called me an hour ago. This is bullshit, complete bullshit. Patricia Henderson is a bored housewife with too much money and not enough problems, so she's manufacturing one. Reagan? No, listen to me. I'm not letting this happen. There's a board meeting tomorrow night, and I'm going to tear them apart. I'm going to expose Patricia for exactly what she is, a jealous, petty woman who can't stand that her daughter isn't the center of attention. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, because you saved my daughter, and I'm not going to stand by and watch them destroy you for being kind. I don't want you to risk your reputation. My reputation? Reagan laughed harshly. My reputation is built on winning cases for people who don't deserve it. At least this time I'd be fighting for someone who actually matters. Gabe was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just be ready to testify tomorrow night. And Gabe? Tell me everything. Every interaction you've had with Ivy or any other student. Every word, every gesture, every moment that Patricia Henderson could possibly twist into something it wasn't. Because I need to know what I'm working with. They spent the next 2 hours on the phone while Reagan took notes. Every piano lesson, every conversation in the courtyard, every smile and wave and kind word. She documented it all, cross-referenced it with school policies, and built her case. By the time she hung up, her hand was cramping from writing, and her mind was racing. She knew Patricia's type, knew exactly how women like that operated. They found targets, usually people they perceived as beneath them, and they destroyed them for sport. Because it made them feel powerful. Because they could. But Reagan Moore hadn't built a career on backing down from bullies. And she wasn't about to start now. That night, she explained the situation to Ivy in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Some people are saying that Mr. Gabe shouldn't be allowed to work at your school anymore. Ivy's face crumbled. Why? Because they don't understand that he's just trying to help. They think he's doing something wrong when he's not. But he's my friend. He's the best friend I have. I know, baby, and I'm going to make sure they understand that. But I might need your help. Would you be willing to talk to some people about Mr. Gabe, about how he makes you feel safe? Ivy nodded solemnly. I'll tell them he's the nicest person in the whole world, and that he helped me talk again when nobody else could, and that if they make him leave, I'll stop talking again, and it'll be their fault. Reagan pulled her daughter close. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Tuesday dragged by in a haze of preparation. Reagan canceled all her meetings, ignored her ringing phone, and focused entirely on building an airtight defense. She pulled school records, reviewed board policies, researched Patricia Henderson's history of complaints, turned out this wasn't her first witch hunt, and prepared a presentation that would leave no room for doubt. By 6:30, she was standing in the school's conference room, watching parents file in. Most looked uncomfortable, like they'd been dragged there against their will. But Patricia Henderson walked in like she owned the place, flanked by 3 other women Reagan recognized from various school functions. The kind of women who lunched together and gossiped and made destroying people their entertainment. Gabe arrived at 6:45 looking pale but composed. He nodded at Reagan, then took a seat in the back. Ivy was with Reagan's assistant. Reagan had decided her daughter didn't need to witness this circus unless absolutely necessary. At 7 o'clock sharp, Margaret Winters called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she began. We're here to address concerns raised by Mrs. Henderson regarding the conduct of our maintenance worker, Gabriel Blake. Patricia stood immediately. If I may, I'd like to explain why I filed this complaint. Please proceed, Margaret said, though she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia smoothed her designer dress and addressed the room like she was giving a TED Talk. For weeks now, I've observed Mr. Blake engaging in what I consider inappropriate behavior with several students, particularly young girls. He sits with them during lunch, talks to them in the hallways, touches their shoulders, their hands, and as a mother, as someone who cares deeply about child safety, I find this deeply concerning. Reagan felt her blood boil, but forced herself to stay quiet. Not yet. My daughter came home crying last week. Patricia continued, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. She said Mr. Blake gave Ivy Moore a special rock he found, made her a bracelet from string, taught her songs on the piano. And when I asked why he wasn't doing these things for all the children, why he seemed so fixated on this one particular girl, she couldn't answer. Because there is no good answer. This is textbook grooming behavior, and I refuse to sit by and watch this school enable it. Several parents shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded. Reagan watched Gabe's face drain of all color. Furthermore, Patricia said, building steam now. I did some research on Mr. Blake. Did you know he's not even qualified to be here? He's a failed therapist who abandoned his practice 3 years ago. No explanation, no forwarding address. just disappeared. And now he's working here around our children with access to them every single day. Does anyone else find that suspicious? Mrs. Henderson, Margaret interrupted gently. We did conduct a thorough background check. Did you? Patricia challenged. Because I don't see any credentials. I don't see any references. All I see is a man with a mysterious past and an unhealthy interest in little girls. The room erupted. Parents talking over each other, some defending Gabe, others demanding answers. Reagan stood. If I may, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who Reagan Moore was. The attorney who never lost. The woman who could destroy you with words alone. Mrs. Henderson has made some serious allegations, Reagan continued. Allegations that, if true, would absolutely warrant Mr. Blake's immediate termination and possible criminal charges. But they're not true, and I can prove it. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Of course you'd defend him. Your daughter is the one he's obsessed with. He's not obsessed with my daughter, Reagan said coldly. He helped her, which is more than I can say for anyone else in this room over the past 11 months. She walked to the front and pulled up her presentation on the projector. Let's talk about Gabriel Blake's mysterious past. Shall we? Mr. Blake isn't a failed therapist. He's one of the most accomplished speech therapists in the country. He ran the Blake Speech and Language Center for nearly a decade. He specialized in selective mutism and helped over 50 children find their voices. Children who had been dismissed as hopeless by other professionals. Images flashed across the screen. Articles praising Gabe's work. Awards. Testimonials from grateful families. Reagan watched Patricia's confident expression falter. Mr. Blake closed his practice 3 years ago after his wife died from throat cancer, a disease that stole her ability to speak. He didn't fail Mrs. Henderson. He grieved. And rather than continue in a field that reminded him of his greatest loss every single day, he chose to step back. That's not suspicious. That's human. She clicked to the next slide. Now let's address these allegations of inappropriate behavior. Mrs. Henderson claims Mr. Blake gave my daughter a special rock. That's true. He gave her a smooth river stone because she was having a panic attack in the courtyard, and he used it as a grounding technique, a standard therapeutic tool. Mrs. Henderson claims he made her a bracelet. Also true. He taught her a basic friendship bracelet pattern during lunch because she was sitting alone, and he noticed she was struggling. Mrs. Henderson claims he taught her songs on the piano. True again. Because I asked him to give her lessons after school with my full knowledge and consent. That doesn't explain. Patricia started, but Reagan cut her off. I'm not finished. Let's talk about grooming behavior since you brought it up. Grooming involves isolation, secrecy, and boundary violations. Mr. Blake has never once been alone with my daughter behind closed doors. Every interaction has occurred in public spaces with other people present. He's never asked her to keep secrets. He's never made her uncomfortable. In fact, he's done the exact opposite. He's made her feel safe for the first time in almost a year. Reagan's voice hardened. Do you know why my daughter stopped talking, Mrs. Henderson? Because she witnessed her parents screaming at each other? Because she heard me say terrible things I didn't mean? Because the world became so loud and so scary that silence was the only place she felt safe. And do you know who helped her find her voice again? Not the expensive therapists, not the psychiatrists, not me. It was the janitor, the man you're trying to destroy because you're bored and vindictive, and you can't stand that someone else's child is getting attention. The room was dead silent. Patricia's face had gone red. How dare you? No, how dare you? Reagan shot back. How dare you weaponize child safety concerns to attack a man who's done nothing wrong? How dare you drag his grief and his past into this and twist it into something ugly? And how dare you try to take away the one person who's helping my daughter heal? She clicked to her final slide. I have statements here from 12 other students who have interacted with Mr. Blake over the past 6 months. Every single one describes him as kind, patient, and appropriate. Not one has ever felt uncomfortable around him. I also have statements from 4 teachers who have witnessed these interactions and found nothing concerning. And I have school security footage from the past month showing every single interaction between Mr. Blake and any student. Would you like to review it? Because I've watched all 47 hours, and I didn't see anything that even remotely resembles inappropriate behavior. Patricia was sputtering now. You can't just— I absolutely can, Reagan said. And if you continue with this witch hunt, Mrs. Henderson, I will personally sue you for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And unlike you, I don't make empty threats. I win, every single time. Margaret cleared her throat. Mrs. Moore, while we appreciate your passionate defense, this is a board matter. Then let the board vote, Reagan interrupted. But do it with all the facts. Not just the twisted version Patricia Henderson is selling because she needs drama to make her life feel important. One of the board members, an older man named Thomas, spoke up. Mrs. Moore, can Mr. Blake speak for himself? I'd like to hear his side. Reagan glanced back at Gabe. He stood slowly, his face still pale, but his voice steady when he spoke. Everything Mrs. Moore said is true, he said quietly. I did help her daughter. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. And I'd help any child in this school who needed it, because that's what decent human beings do. We see people struggling, and we try to help. We don't turn away because it's not our job, or because people might talk. He took a breath. I'm not a therapist anymore. I can't be. But I can still be kind. I can still listen. I can still show up for kids who need someone to see them. And if that makes me suspicious or inappropriate in your eyes, then I don't belong here anyway. That's not— Thomas started, but Gabe kept talking. My wife died 3 years ago. She lost her voice slowly, painfully, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Nothing I could do to make it better. And for 3 years I've been walking around feeling like a failure, like I'd wasted my whole career helping other people when I couldn't help the one person who mattered most. His voice cracked. And then I met Ivy, this little girl who'd stopped talking because the world hurt too much. And I saw my wife in her, saw that same fear, that same pain. And I thought maybe I can't save Sarah. But maybe I can help this kid not feel so alone. Maybe I can give her what I failed to give my wife. Maybe I can just listen without trying to fix everything. The room was utterly silent now. Several parents were crying. Even Patricia looked shaken. So yeah, I helped her, Gabe continued. I gave her rocks to hold when she was scared. I made bracelets with her when she was lonely. I taught her songs when she needed something beautiful to focus on besides all the ugly stuff in her head. And I do it all over again, because that's what people do. We help each other. We show up. We try. He met Patricia's eyes directly. I'm sorry if that scares you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm sorry you look at kindness and see danger. But that says a lot more about you than it does about me. Patricia stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I will not be spoken to this way. Then leave, Reagan said simply. Nobody's stopping you, but don't expect the rest of us to join your crusade against decency. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out, her friends scrambling to follow. The door slammed behind them, and the tension in the room shifted immediately. Thomas looked at Margaret. I move we end the suspension effective immediately and issue a formal apology to Mr. Blake. Seconded, another board member said. All in favor. Every hand in the room went up except Margaret's. She sighed. Very well. Mr. Blake, on behalf of Bellhurst Academy, I apologize for this ordeal. You're reinstated as of right now, and Mrs. Henderson's complaint is dismissed. Gabe nodded, looking stunned. Thank you. As the meeting dissolved and parents filed out, several stopped to shake Gabe's hand or apologize. Reagan hung back watching him and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. When the room finally cleared, Gabe walked over to her. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Yes, I did. Why? Reagan met his eyes. Because you matter. To Ivy. To me. To every kid in this school who needs someone to see them. And I wasn't going to let Patricia Henderson destroy you because she's miserable and wants company. Gabe's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep being you. Keep showing up. Keep helping kids feel less alone. Reagan paused. And maybe keep showing up for me too. Because I'm still learning how to do this. How to be what Ivy needs. And I think I need you for that. Reagan. I'm not asking for anything, she interrupted quickly. I'm just saying I'm grateful. For everything. For all of it. Gabe reached out and took her hand, and Reagan felt electricity shoot up her arm at the contact. I'm grateful too, he said quietly. More than you know. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, and Reagan thought about how much had changed in 2 weeks. How a janitor had become the most important person in her daughter's life. How a stranger had taught her things about parenting she should have known all along. How she was starting to feel things for this man that terrified her. Things she wasn't ready to name yet, but things that felt an awful lot like hope. The drive home from the board meeting was quiet, but Reagan's mind was anything but. She kept replaying the moment Gabe had taken her hand, the warmth of his palm against hers, the way her heart had stuttered in her chest. She was 42 years old, for God's sake. Too old to feel like a teenager with a crush. Too practical to let feelings cloud her judgment. But there it was anyway. Undeniable and terrifying and entirely inconvenient. When they got home, Ivy was already asleep on Reagan's assistant's lap, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. Reagan carried her to bed and tucked her in, then returned to the living room where her assistant was gathering her things. How'd it go? Jennifer asked. We won. Gabe's reinstated. Good. That Henderson woman sounds like a piece of work. Jennifer paused at the door. Reagan. Yeah. I've worked for you for 6 years. I've never seen you fight that hard for anything that wasn't a case. Just thought you should know that. After Jennifer left, Reagan poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window looking out at the city lights. She thought about what Jennifer had said, thought about how she'd felt standing in that conference room, defending Gabe with everything she had. It hadn't felt like work. It had felt personal. It had felt like protecting something that mattered, someone who mattered. Her phone buzzed, a text from Gabe. Thank you again for tonight. I don't know what I would have done without you. Reagan stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. You would have been fine. You're stronger than you think. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. Get some sleep. Ivy's first piano lesson is tomorrow, and she's been talking about it non-stop. I'm looking forward to it. Good night, Reagan. Good night, Gabe. She set her phone down and realized she was smiling. When was the last time a text message had made her smile? The next afternoon, Reagan left work early to pick up Ivy from school. She found her daughter waiting outside the music room, practically bouncing with excitement. Is it time? Is Mr. Gabe here? Can we start now? Let's go find out, Reagan said, laughing. Gabe was inside the music room, sitting at the piano, his fingers moving across the keys in a melody Reagan didn't recognize. He looked up when they entered and smiled. Ready for your first lesson? So ready. Ivy ran to the piano bench and climbed up beside him. What are we learning? First, we're learning how to sit. Posture is important. Gabe adjusted Ivy's position gently. There. Now see these keys. Each one makes a different sound. Want to try? For the next 45 minutes, Reagan sat in a chair by the window and watched her daughter learn. Watched Gabe's patience as Ivy hit wrong notes and got frustrated. Watched him encourage her with quiet words and gentle corrections. Watched her daughter's face light up when she finally played a simple scale correctly. Did you hear that, Mom? I did it. I heard it, baby. You were perfect. Not perfect, Gabe corrected gently, but really, really good. And next time, you'll be even better. That's how learning works. After the lesson, Ivy ran off to the bathroom, leaving Reagan and Gabe alone in the music room. "She's a natural," Gabe said, organizing sheet music. "Quick learner, good ear. She'll be playing real songs in no time." "She loves this. I haven't seen her this excited about anything in months." Reagan paused. "Thank you for doing this. You don't have to keep thanking me." "I know, but I want to." Reagan walked closer to the piano. "Can I ask you something? Anything." "Last night, when you defended yourself to the board, you said helping Ivy gave you something you couldn't give your wife. What did you mean?" Gabe's hands stilled on the keys. "I meant that with Sarah, I was always trying to fix things, find solutions, make it better. And I never just sat with her in the hard stuff. I never let her be sad or scared or broken without trying to solve it. And I think that made her feel more alone. And with Ivy. With Ivy, I don't have to fix anything. I can just be present. Let her feel what she feels. And somehow that's enough." "It's more than enough," Reagan said softly. "It's everything." Their eyes met, and Reagan felt that pull again. That magnetic something that made her want to step closer to touch him. To "Mom, Mr. Gabe, I'm back." Ivy burst into the room and the moment shattered. But as they walked to the car together, Reagan caught Gabe looking at her, and she knew he'd felt it too. That night, Ivy couldn't stop talking about her lesson. She chattered through dinner, through her bath, through getting ready for bed. And Reagan just listened, soaking in every word, every detail, every sign that her daughter was healing. "Mom," Ivy said as Reagan was tucking her in. "Yeah, baby." "Do you think Mr. Gabe is lonely?" The question caught Reagan off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because he's always by himself. He doesn't talk about having friends or going places. Just work and his apartment. And sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking, he gets really sad." Reagan sat on the edge of the bed. "I think maybe he is a little lonely. He lost someone very important to him, and that kind of hurt takes a long time to heal." "Do you think we could help him, like he helped me?" "How would we do that?" Ivy thought about it seriously. "We could invite him to more dinners, and movies, and maybe the park on Saturdays, just so he knows he's not alone, that he has a family, even if his wife isn't here anymore." Reagan's eyes filled with tears. "I think that's a beautiful idea, Ivy." "Really?" "Really. We'll talk to Mr. Gabe about it tomorrow." But tomorrow came with unexpected complications. Reagan was in a morning meeting when her phone rang. Marcus, her ex-husband. She hadn't heard from him in 3 months. She excused herself and stepped into the hallway. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Nice to hear your voice too, Reagan." His tone was familiar, charming on the surface, condescending underneath. "I'm in town for a conference. Thought I'd swing by and see Ivy." "You can't just swing by. We have a custody agreement. You're supposed to give me 2 weeks' notice." "Come on, Reagan. Don't be difficult. I'm her father." "You're also the father who walked out and hasn't bothered to video call in 3 months. So forgive me if I'm not exactly excited about you disrupting her routine." Her routine. What routine? Last I checked, she still wasn't talking. Reagan felt rage flood through her. Actually, she's talking now. A lot. But you'd know that if you'd bothered to check in. There was a pause. "She's talking since when?" "Since about 3 weeks ago." "That's great. That's really great." Marcus sounded genuinely pleased. "See, I told you she'd snap out of it eventually. Kids are resilient." "She didn't snap out of it, Marcus. She had help, from someone who actually cared enough to listen to her." "Meaning I didn't?" "Meaning you left, and you haven't looked back. So don't act like you're Father of the Year because you decided to show up for an afternoon." Jesus, Reagan. Why are you always so angry? "Because you make me angry. Because you walked away from your daughter when she needed you most. Because you get to pretend everything's fine while I've been dealing with the fallout of our marriage for 11 months. Our marriage ended because you were more interested in your career than your family. Our marriage ended because you had an affair and blamed me for it. Silence. Then, I'm picking Ivy up from school today. 3 o'clock. You can either be there or not, but I'm seeing my daughter. He hung up before Reagan could argue. She stood in the hallway shaking with anger and fear and something else she couldn't name. Marcus showing up was bad. Marcus seeing Ivy after all this time was worse. But Marcus disrupting the fragile peace they'd built over the past few weeks was unbearable. She called the school immediately. Mrs. Winters, this is Reagan Moore. My ex-husband is planning to pick up Ivy today without authorization. Do not release her to him under any circumstances. I'll be there at 3 to collect her myself. Of course, Mrs. Moore. We'll make a note. Then she called Gabe. Marcus is in town, she said without preamble. He's planning to ambush Ivy at school pickup. I don't know how she's going to react to seeing him. She hasn't mentioned him in weeks. Do you want me there? Reagan stopped. She did want him there, desperately. But what did that say about her? I don't want to drag you into my mess. Reagan, I'm already in your mess, by choice, so let me help. Okay, thank you. Can you be at the front entrance at 3? I'll be there. Reagan spent the rest of the day unable to focus on anything except what might happen at 3 o'clock. She arrived at the school 15 minutes early and found Gabe already waiting. He was in his janitor uniform leaning against the wall, but he straightened when he saw her. How are you doing? I'm terrified, Reagan admitted. Ivy's been doing so well. What if seeing Marcus sets her back? What if she stops talking again? She won't. She's stronger than you think. But what if... Reagan. Gabe put his hands on her shoulders, and the contact steadied her immediately. Whatever happens, we'll handle it. Together, okay? Okay. At exactly 3 o'clock, Marcus pulled up in a rental car. He was still handsome. Reagan had to give him that in that polished, successful way that had first attracted her 20 years ago. But now, all she saw when she looked at him was the man who'd given up, who'd walked away when things got hard. He spotted Reagan and walked over with that easy confidence that had always made her want to punch him. Reagan, you look good. Don't. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying, and I'm telling you to stop. Reagan crossed her arms. Ivy doesn't know you're coming. I didn't want to get her hopes up in case you decided to bail. Again. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm here, aren't I? For now. Until your conference ends and you fly back to Seattle and forget you have a daughter for another 3 months. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Marcus. But here we are. Marcus's eyes shifted to Gabe, who was standing slightly behind Reagan. Who's this? A friend. A friend who works at the school. Marcus's tone was skeptical. Or a friend who's something more. None of your business either way. Before Marcus could respond, the doors opened and students started flooding out. Ivy appeared with a group of classmates, laughing at something one of them said. Then she saw Reagan, and her face lit up. Mom. She ran over her backpack, bouncing, and threw her arms around Reagan's waist. Then she noticed Gabe and smiled even wider. Mr. Gabe, did you come to walk us to the car? Something like that, Gabe said gently. Ivy. The voice came from behind Reagan. Soft, uncertain, trying to be warm, but landing somewhere in the territory of awkward. Ivy's smile disappeared. She went completely still in Reagan's arms, and Reagan felt her daughter's small body tense. Hi, baby girl. It's Daddy. Ivy turned slowly. Her face was blank, unreadable. Reagan watched her daughter look at her father for the first time in months, and she held her breath. Hi, Ivy said finally. Not warm, not cold, just factual. Marcus crouched down. Look at you. You've gotten so big. How's my girl? I'm okay. Mom tells me you're talking again. That's great, sweetie. I knew you would. Ivy didn't respond. She just stood there, pressed against Reagan's legs, watching her father with those wide, solemn eyes. Marcus looked at Reagan helplessly. Can I take her for ice cream or something? Just an hour. I want to spend some time with her. Ivy, Reagan asked quietly, do you want to go with Daddy? Ivy shook her head. Come on, baby girl. It's been so long. Don't you want to hang out with your old dad? No, Ivy said simply. Marcus's face crumbled. Ivy, please. I came all this way. You left. Ivy interrupted, her voice clear and sharp. When I was scared and sad and couldn't talk, you left. Mom says you had to go for work, but I know that's not true. You left because I was broken and you didn't want to deal with it. Ivy, that's not... Yes, it is. Ivy's voice was stronger now. And now I can talk again and you came back. But I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to people who stayed. Like Mom. And Mr. Gabe. Marcus stood up slowly, his face red. Reagan, did you tell her to say that? I've never said a word against you to our daughter, Reagan said coldly. This is all her. These are her feelings, and you're going to have to deal with them. This is insane. She's 7 years old. She doesn't understand. I understand that you made Mom cry. Ivy said, her voice trembling now. I understand that you stopped calling me. I understand that when I needed a dad, you weren't there. Mr. Gabe was there. Mr. Gabe helped me, not you. Marcus's eyes snapped to Gabe. So that's what this is about. You've replaced me with the janitor. Watch it, Gabe said quietly. It was the first time Reagan had heard him sound dangerous. No, I want to know. My daughter won't talk to me, but she'll talk to you. What did you do? Buy her things. Tell her what she wanted to hear. I listened, Gabe said. That's all. I just listened. Bullshit. You did something. You manipulated her. Mr. Gabe didn't do anything, Ivy said loudly. Several parents turned to look. He was just nice to me. He didn't yell. He didn't make Mom cry. He didn't leave. He stayed. Marcus looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. Ivy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there, but I'm here now. I want to make it right. You can't, Ivy said, and her voice was so matter-of-fact, it was heartbreaking. It's too late. You missed everything. And now I don't need you anymore. Reagan's heart was breaking. This was what she'd been afraid of. This moment where her daughter had to face her father's abandonment and put words to the hurt. But she also felt proud. Because Ivy wasn't shutting down. She wasn't going silent. She was speaking her truth even when it was hard. Ivy, give your dad a chance, Reagan heard herself say. She didn't want to. Every fiber of her being wanted to take Ivy and run. But she knew her daughter needed to make this choice for herself. Ivy looked up at Reagan, then at Gabe, then back at her father. 1 hour, she said finally. But Mom comes too. And Mr. Gabe if he wants. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Okay, 1 hour. All of us. They ended up at a diner 3 blocks from the school. Ivy sat between Reagan and Gabe in one booth, while Marcus sat alone across from them. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. For the first 20 minutes, Marcus tried to make conversation. Asked about school, about her friends, about what she'd been doing. Ivy answered in short sentences, polite but distant, like she was talking to a stranger, which Reagan realized he basically was. So this piano thing, Marcus said, clearly grasping at straws. That's new. Mr. Gabe teaches me, Ivy said. I'm learning scales. And next week I get to learn a real song. That's great, sweetie. Marcus forced a smile at Gabe. Thank you for taking the time to do that. It's my pleasure, Gabe said evenly. Must be nice, Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Being the hero. Sweeping in to save the day while the rest of us are just trying to hold our lives together. Marcus, Reagan warned. No, I want to understand this. My daughter stops talking for 11 months. I'm devastated, but I'm also trying to keep my business from falling apart after a divorce that cost me everything. I call when I can, I send gifts, I do what I can from 1,000 miles away. And then I find out she's talking again to a janitor I've never met. You can't blame me for having questions. I'm not asking you to blame yourself, Gabe said carefully. I'm asking you to listen to what Ivy's trying to tell you. And what's that? That she needed you here, not on the phone, not sending presents, here, and you weren't. Marcus's face went red. You don't get to lecture me about being a father. You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like to watch your life fall apart and have to choose between your child and your survival. You're right, Gabe said quietly. I don't have kids. But I know what it's like to lose someone because I was too focused on surviving to actually be present. And I know that no business, no job, no amount of money is worth losing your daughter. Easy to say when you're not the one paying child support and alimony and trying to rebuild from nothing. Dad, Ivy said softly. Everyone went quiet. It's okay. You don't have to pretend anymore. Pretend what, baby? Pretend you care. I know you don't. Not really. You care about your business and your new girlfriend and being important. But you don't care about me, not enough to stay. And that's okay, because I have Mom and I have Mr. Gabe, and I don't need you to be my dad anymore. The words hung in the air like bombs. Marcus's face crumbled completely. He looked at Reagan. Did you tell her about Jennifer? Reagan froze. Who's Jennifer? My girlfriend. I didn't think Ivy knew. I heard you on the phone once, Ivy said. Before you left, you told her Mom was crazy and I was too much work and you couldn't wait to start over. So I know you don't want me. And that's okay. Because I don't want you either. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. Ivy, I didn't mean it like that. I was angry, You were being honest, Ivy said simply. And now I'm being honest. I don't want you here. I don't want ice cream with you. I just want to go home with my mom and Mr. Gabe and forget you came back. Marcus stood abruptly. He threw money on the table without looking at any of them. Fine. You know what, fine. I tried. I came here, I tried to make it right, and this is what I get. Reagan, you've clearly poisoned her against me. And you... He looked at Gabe. I don't know who you think you are, but stay away from my daughter. Your daughter doesn't want me to stay away, Gabe said calmly. She wants you to stay away, and maybe you should listen to her for once. Marcus left without another word. The bell above the diner door chimed as he walked out, and then he was gone. Ivy sat very still for a moment. Then she burst into tears. Reagan pulled her daughter into her lap, holding her tight as she sobbed. Gabe reached across the table and put his hand on Ivy's back, rubbing small circles, his expression devastated. I'm sorry, Ivy kept saying. I'm sorry I was mean. I'm sorry I made him leave. You didn't make him leave, baby, Reagan said fiercely. He left because he couldn't handle the truth, because he's a coward, and none of that is your fault. None of it. But I said terrible things. You said honest things, Gabe said gently. And honesty isn't cruel, it's brave. You were so brave today, Ivy. I don't feel brave. I feel sad. That's okay too, Reagan whispered. Brave and sad can live together. And we're going to sit right here and feel it all with you. They stayed in the diner for another hour, while Ivy cried herself out. Other patrons stared, and Reagan didn't care. Let them look. Let them judge. Her daughter was finally letting out all the pain she'd been holding for months, and Reagan was going to be there for every second of it. When they finally got home, Reagan put Ivy to bed early. Her daughter was exhausted, emotionally drained, and asleep within minutes. Reagan sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just watching her breathe, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. She found Gabe in the living room when she finally emerged. He'd followed them home without being asked, and Reagan was grateful for it. She's asleep, Reagan said, sitting down heavily beside him. How are you doing? I'm angry. At Marcus for being exactly who I knew he was. At myself for letting Ivy hope he might be different. At the universe for putting my daughter through this. You couldn't have prevented this, Gabe said. She needed to see for herself that he wasn't going to change. She needed to say those things out loud. It hurt, but it was necessary. I know. I just wish... Reagan's voice broke. I wish I could protect her from everything, from pain and disappointment and fathers who don't know how to love their kids. You can't protect her from pain, Gabe said gently. But you can teach her how to survive it, how to speak her truth even when it's hard. You did that today. You gave her permission to be honest, and she was. That's powerful. Reagan turned to look at him. Really look at him. This man who'd walked into their lives by accident and become essential without trying. This broken, grieving janitor who knew more about healing than anyone she'd ever met. Why are you so good at this? She asked. I'm not good at it. I'm just learning as I go. Same as you. No, you're better than me. You always know the right thing to say, the right way to be. I'm just flailing around hoping I don't screw up too badly. Reagan. Gabe reached out and took her hand, and Reagan felt that familiar electricity. You're doing an incredible job. Ivy is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to know you. Don't sell yourself short. I'm scared, Reagan admitted. Of messing this up. Of losing her. Of... She stopped. Of what? Of this, Reagan said, gesturing between them. Of whatever this is becoming. Because it feels important. It feels like something I can't afford to lose. And that terrifies me. Gabe was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm scared too. I haven't let myself feel anything real since Sarah died. And now, here you are making me feel everything all at once. It's overwhelming. But it's also... Also what? Also the first time I've felt alive in 3 years, Gabe said quietly. Reagan felt tears spill down her cheeks. I don't want to be a rebound. Or a replacement. Or... You're not, Gabe interrupted. Reagan, you're not replacing anyone. You're you. And that's more than enough. They sat there in silence, hands clasped, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them. Reagan wanted to kiss him, wanted to close the distance and see what happened. But she was also afraid. Afraid of rushing. Afraid of ruining what they'd built. Afraid of hurting him or herself or Ivy in the process. Can we just sit here for a while? Reagan asked finally. I don't want to be alone tonight. We can sit here as long as you want, Gabe said. And they did. They sat together on the couch as the city lights flickered below them, as midnight came and went, as Reagan's head eventually found its way to Gabe's shoulder and stayed there. And for the first time since her divorce, Reagan let herself believe that maybe she wasn't broken beyond repair. Maybe she was just healing. And maybe healing looked like this, like sitting in the quiet with someone who understood that some silences were sacred. Some silences were home. Reagan woke up on the couch with morning light streaming through the windows and Gabe's arm still around her shoulders. For a moment, she didn't move. Didn't want to break whatever spell had been cast in the quiet hours of the night. But then reality crashed back in. It was a school day. Ivy would be waking up soon, and she was lying on her couch with a man who wasn't her husband wrapped around her like they'd been doing this for years. She sat up carefully and Gabe stirred. Morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Morning? Ivy will be up soon and she'll have questions if she sees you here. Right, of course. Gabe stood quickly, running a hand through his hair. I should go anyway. Need to get home and change before work. They stood there, awkwardly, the intimacy of the night before dissolving in the harsh light of day. Reagan wanted to say something, wanted to acknowledge what had passed between them, but the words stuck in her throat. Thank you, she said finally, for staying, for everything. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to. Gabe smiled, that small, sad smile she was starting to know by heart. I'll see you later. Tell Ivy I said good morning. After he left, Reagan stood in her empty living room feeling the loss of his presence like a physical thing. She'd spent 11 months learning to be alone, learning to exist without a partner, learning that she didn't need anyone, and now here she was, already missing someone who'd only been gone 30 seconds. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she'd promised herself she wouldn't do. She wouldn't fall for someone new, wouldn't risk Ivy's fragile stability on another relationship that might not work, wouldn't open herself up to being hurt again. But it was too late for those promises now. Ivy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Was Mr. Gabe here? How did you—" "I heard his voice, and I smell his soap. He uses that pine tree kind." Ivy climbed onto the couch. "Did he sleep over?" "He just stayed for a while after you went to bed. We were talking." "About Dad." Reagan sat down next to her daughter. "A little bit. How are you feeling about yesterday?" Ivy was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I'm sad, but I'm also not sad. Is that weird?" "Not at all. Tell me more." "I'm sad that my dad doesn't want me, but I'm not sad that he's gone. Because when he's here, everything feels wrong. Like wearing shoes that don't fit. It hurts, but you keep trying to make it work because you're supposed to. But then someone tells you that you can take the shoes off, and suddenly you can breathe again." Reagan pulled her daughter close. "When did you get so wise?" "Mr. Gabe says I've always been wise. I just needed someone to listen to the wise parts, instead of just the scared parts." Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Reagan couldn't name it exactly, but she felt it every time Gabe walked into a room. Every time their hands brushed accidentally. Every time he looked at her with those soft, knowing eyes that saw through all her armor. They started having dinner together 3 nights a week, then 4. Then it became strange when Gabe wasn't there. Ivy's piano lessons expanded from twice a week to daily 15-minute sessions because Ivy asked for them, and Gabe never said no. Reagan found herself leaving work earlier, prioritizing time with her daughter over billable hours, and somehow the world didn't end. One Saturday afternoon, Reagan found herself at Gabe's apartment for the first time. He'd invited them over to practice piano in his space since the school was closed for the weekend. The apartment was small, like he'd set a studio with barely enough room for a bed, a tiny kitchen, and an upright piano shoved against one wall. But it was warm, personal, the kind of space that felt lived in rather than just inhabited. "Sorry about the mess," Gabe said, moving a stack of books off the piano bench. "I wasn't expecting company." "It's not messy," Ivy said, already exploring. "It's cozy. Mom, look at all these plants." There were plants everywhere, succulents on the windowsill, a fern hanging from the ceiling, several pots of herbs in the kitchen. Life everywhere you looked. Sarah loved plants. Gabe said quietly. "After she died, I couldn't keep them alive. Everything just withered. But about 6 months ago, I tried again. Figured if I could keep something growing, maybe I wasn't completely useless." Reagan walked over to a photo on the bookshelf. A woman with dark hair and bright eyes laughing at the camera. "Is this her?" "Yeah. That was taken about a year before she got sick. We were at the beach, her favorite place." She was beautiful. She was everything. Gabe's voice was thick. "I don't talk about her much. Most people get uncomfortable. But I think about her every day. Wonder what she'd think of my life now. Whether she'd be proud or disappointed." "She'd be proud," Reagan said firmly. "Look what you've done for Ivy, for me. You've helped us become a family again." "You were always a family." "No, we were 2 broken people living in the same space. Now we're healing, together, because of you." Ivy called from across the room. "Mr. Gabe, can we play now?" While Ivy practiced her scales, Reagan sat on Gabe's bed, the only other furniture in the room, and watched them. Watched the patient way he corrected her mistakes, the encouraging words when she got frustrated, the genuine pride when she nailed a difficult passage. And she thought about how natural this felt, how right. "Mom, come listen," Ivy demanded. "I learned a new song." Reagan joined them at the piano, standing behind Ivy's bench, close enough that her shoulder brushed Gabe's. She didn't move away. Neither did he. Ivy played a simple melody, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," with careful concentration. When she finished, she beamed up at them. "That was perfect, sweetheart. Reagan said. "Mr. Gabe, will you play something?" Ivy asked. "Something beautiful." Gabe hesitated, but Ivy scooted over to make room. He sat down beside her and let his fingers find the keys. The melody that emerged was haunting and lovely, full of longing and loss and hope, all tangled together. "What song is that?" Ivy whispered. "Something I wrote for Sarah," Gabe said softly. "A long time ago. I haven't played it since she died. It's sad. Yeah, but it's also full of love. And sometimes love is sad. When you miss someone, when you wish they were still here, that's love that doesn't know where to go." Reagan felt tears streaming down her face. She wiped them away quickly, but Ivy noticed. "Mom, why are you crying?" "Because it's beautiful, and because I understand what Mr. Gabe means. Sometimes love is the saddest thing in the world." Gabe's fingers stilled on the keys. He turned to look at Reagan, and something passed between them. Something inevitable and terrifying and absolutely undeniable. "Ivy," Reagan said, her voice shaking slightly. "Can you go look at Mr. Gabe's plants for a minute? I need to talk to him about something." "About grown-up stuff." "Yeah, about grown-up stuff." Ivy rolled her eyes but wandered off toward the window. Reagan and Gabe were left alone at the piano, so close their knees were touching. "Gabe, Reagan, we should—" They both stopped, laughed nervously. "You first," Gabe said. Reagan took a breath. "I think I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me, because I swore I wouldn't do this again, wouldn't risk my heart or Ivy's stability on someone new, but here I am anyway, falling, and I don't know how to stop it." Gabe's hand found hers. "I don't think you're supposed to stop it. But what if it doesn't work? What if we mess this up and hurt each other and Ivy gets caught in the middle? What if it does work?" Gabe countered gently. "What if we don't mess it up? What if this is exactly what all three of us need?" That's a lot of what ifs. Life is what ifs, Reagan. You can't control the outcome. You can only choose whether to take the risk. And you want to take the risk with me, with us. "I want to try," Gabe said. "I'm scared too. I'm terrified of betraying Sarah's memory. Terrified of not being enough for you. Terrified of disappointing Ivy. But I'm more terrified of letting you walk away because I was too afraid to admit that I'm falling for you too." Reagan's breath caught. "You are?" "I am. I didn't mean to. I thought I was done with feeling anything for anyone. But you're fierce and broken and beautiful, and you make me want to be better. You make me want to try again." They sat there, hands clasped, staring at each other like they were making some kind of silent vow. Then Ivy's voice cut through the moment. "Are you guys going to kiss or what? Because this is taking forever." They broke apart laughing. Ivy was standing by the window with her arms crossed, looking thoroughly exasperated. "How long have you been watching?" Reagan asked. "Long enough to know you like each other, and also long enough to be very bored of the talking. Grown-ups talk too much." Gabe smiled at Reagan. "She's not wrong." "So are we doing this?" Reagan asked quietly. "Really doing this?" "I think we already are," Gabe said. And then before Reagan could overthink it, before fear could stop her, she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and careful and full of everything they'd been too afraid to say out loud. When they pulled apart, Gabe's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Finally," Ivy said from across the room. "Can we get pizza now? I'm starving." The weeks that followed felt like learning a new language. How to be a family of three people who'd found each other by accident. How to navigate date nights and bedtime routines and all the small intimacies that came with building something new. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and difficult conversations and times when Reagan's fear threatened to overwhelm everything else. But there were also mornings waking up with Gabe in her bed and Ivy crawling in between them. There were piano recitals in the living room, and dinners where everyone talked at once, and quiet moments where silence felt like the most natural thing in the world. One evening, about 2 months after that first kiss, Ivy's teacher called. "Mrs. Moore, I wanted to give you a heads up about something." The school is having an end-of-year ceremony where students can share what they've learned this year. Ivy volunteered to speak. Reagan's heart stopped. She wants to speak in front of people. She insisted. She said she has something important to say, and she's ready to say it. I wanted to make sure you'd be there. Of course. Absolutely. After she hung up, Reagan found Gabe and Ivy in the music room. Gabe's apartment had become too small, so the piano had migrated to Reagan's penthouse. They'd cleared out the formal dining room she never used and turned it into a music space instead. Ivy, your teacher called. She said you volunteered to speak at the school ceremony. Ivy looked up from the keys. Yeah, is that okay? It's more than okay. I'm just surprised. Are you nervous? A little. But Mr. Gabe says being nervous means you care about something. And I care about this. I have something I want to say. Can I ask what? It's a surprise, but it's good. I promise. The night of the ceremony arrived too quickly. Reagan dressed carefully, her hands shaking as she tried to clasp her necklace. Gabe appeared behind her and took over his fingers steady. You okay? He asked. I'm terrified. What if she freezes? What if the pressure is too much and she shuts down again? She won't. She's ready for this. You have to trust her. I do trust her. I just don't trust the world not to hurt her. Gabe turned Reagan around to face him. The world is going to hurt her sometimes. That's inevitable. But you've taught her how to survive it, how to speak her truth, even when it's hard. She's going to be fine. They arrived at the school auditorium to find it packed. Parents, teachers, students, everyone seemed to be there. Reagan spotted Patricia Henderson in the third row and felt her jaw tighten. But Gabe squeezed her hand. Ignore her. This isn't about her. They found seats near the front. Margaret Winters took the stage and welcomed everyone. Then, one by one, students came up to share. Some read poems. Some displayed artwork. One boy demonstrated a science experiment. And then it was Ivy's turn. Reagan's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Gabe's hand found hers again, and she gripped it like a lifeline. Ivy walked onto the stage in the dress Reagan had helped her pick out, blue, her favorite color, with her hair in 2 braids. She looked so small standing there in front of all those people. So vulnerable. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. Hi, my name is Ivy Moore, and I'm 7 years old. For most of this year, I couldn't talk. Not because I didn't want to, but because talking felt too scary. Because the world was so loud that silence was the only place I felt safe. The auditorium had gone completely quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. A lot of people tried to help me, Ivy continued. Doctors and therapists and people with fancy degrees. They all had ideas about how to fix me. But nobody could fix me because I wasn't broken. I was just hurting. And what I needed wasn't someone to fix me. I needed someone to listen. Reagan felt tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Gabe's hand was trembling in hers. I found that person, Ivy said. His name is Mr. Gabe, and he works here at our school. He's the janitor, which means most people don't really see him. But I see him, and he sees me. He didn't make me talk. He just sat with me when I was quiet. He gave me rocks to hold when I was scared. He taught me songs when I needed something beautiful. And slowly, I started to feel safe enough to try talking again. Ivy paused, looking out at the audience. My hero isn't the loudest person. He's not the most important or the most famous. He's the one who listened when nobody else did. He's the one who taught me that silence isn't something to be afraid of, and that speaking up is brave even when your voice shakes. She looked directly at Reagan and Gabe. And I want to thank my mom too. Because she learned how to listen. She learned how to love me when I was quiet. And she taught me that families don't have to look like everyone else's. They just have to love each other. Even when it's hard. Even when it's messy. Even when it takes time. Ivy took a breath. So, if you're listening to this and you feel scared or sad or like you can't find your voice, I want you to know that it's okay. Your voice will come back when it's ready. And until then, find someone who knows how to listen. Find someone who makes silence feel safe, because that's when healing starts. That's when you can finally breathe again." She gave a small bow and walked off the stage. The auditorium erupted in applause. Reagan was sobbing now, not even trying to hide it. Gabe pulled her close, and she felt his shoulders shaking too. When Ivy found them in the lobby after the ceremony, she launched herself into Reagan's arms. "I did it! Did you hear me? I didn't freeze." "You were perfect," Reagan said, her voice breaking. "So perfect, baby. I'm so proud of you. Mr. Gabe, did you like it?" Gabe crouched down to Ivy's level. His eyes were red, his face wet with tears he hadn't bothered to wipe away. "Ivy, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. And I'm honored, so honored that you called me your hero. But you know what? What? You're mine too. Because you taught me that it's okay to try again. That it's okay to let people in even when you're scared. That healing doesn't mean forgetting the people you've lost. It means learning to love again anyway." Ivy threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Mr. Gabe." Reagan heard Gabe's breath catch, saw him close his eyes and hold Ivy tighter. "I love you too, kiddo. So much." Several teachers came over to congratulate Ivy. Parents Reagan barely knew stopped to shake her hand. Even Patricia Henderson approached, looking uncomfortable. "That was very moving," Patricia said stiffly. "I may have misjudged Mr. Blake. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused." Reagan could have said a dozen cutting things, could have made Patricia feel as small as she'd tried to make Gabe feel. But she looked at Ivy beaming and confident and healed, and decided it didn't matter anymore. "Thank you for saying that," Reagan said simply, and she meant it. That night after Ivy was asleep, Reagan and Gabe sat on the balcony looking out at the city lights. The same view Reagan had once loved because it made her feel powerful. Now she barely noticed it. The view that mattered was sitting right beside her. "I've been thinking," Gabe said quietly, about moving. My lease is up next month, and that studio is too small. I was thinking maybe I could find something bigger. Maybe with room for a piano and some plants and—" "Move in with us," Reagan interrupted. Gabe turned to look at her surprise written across his face. "What?" "Move in with us. This place is too big for just me and Ivy. And you're already here most nights anyway. And I want you here, all the time. Not as a guest, as family." "Reagan, are you sure that's a big step?" "I'm sure. Ivy's sure. We talked about it last week and she's already planning where to put your plant collection." Reagan took his hand. "I know it's fast. I know it's scary. But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from happiness because I'm afraid it won't last. I want to take the risk, with you." Gabe was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah and I talked about having kids. We had names picked out, a nursery painted, and then she got sick and all those plans disappeared. For 3 years I've been mourning the life I didn't get to have, the family I didn't get to build." Reagan's heart sank. "Gabe, if this is too much—" "Let me finish," he said gently. "I've been mourning that life, but sitting here with you with Ivy asleep in the next room with this strange, beautiful family we've accidentally built, I realize something. I didn't lose my chance at family. It just looks different than I planned. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even better." "So, is that a yes?" Gabe smiled, and it was the first time Reagan had seen him smile without any sadness behind it. "That's a yes, if you'll have me. We'll have you, all of you, the grief and the healing and the hope and everything in between." They kissed on the balcony as the city hummed below them, and Reagan thought about how strange life was, how you could plan for one future and end up living another, how loss and love could exist in the same heart, How silence could be healing and speaking could be brave, and sometimes the family you built by accident was exactly the family you needed. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning, Reagan woke to the sound of piano music drifting through the apartment. She found Ivy and Gabe at the piano in the music room, playing a duet they'd been working on. Gabe's things were scattered throughout the apartment, now his books on the shelves, his plants on every surface, his presence in every room. And it felt right. It felt like home. "Mom!" Ivy called when she noticed Reagan in the doorway. "Come listen to our song." Reagan joined them, standing behind the piano bench where her daughter and the man she loved sat side by side. And as they played, she thought about Ivy's speech at the ceremony, about heroes and healing, about voices and silence, about how sometimes the most important words weren't the ones you spoke out loud, but the ones you learned to hear in the quiet. When the song ended, Ivy turned around on the bench and looked up at Reagan with those wise, solemn eyes. "Mom, are you happy?" It was such a simple question, such a loaded question. Reagan thought about her answer carefully. "I'm learning to be," she said finally. "Because happiness isn't something you find all at once. It's something you build piece by piece, day by day. It's sitting on the couch with the people you love. It's piano lessons, and burned dinners, and Saturday mornings that don't have a plan. It's learning that silence doesn't have to be lonely. It's finding people who teach you how to listen, how to heal, how to try again." "That sounds nice," Ivy said. "It is nice," Reagan agreed. "It's the best thing I've ever known." Gabe reached up and took Reagan's hand, and she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the family she'd imagined. But it was real and messy and full of love that had learned to grow in unexpected places. "Hey, Ivy," Gabe said softly. "Yeah. Thank you for teaching me how to listen." "Thank you for hearing me," Ivy replied. And Reagan stood there with her hand in Gabe's and her daughter beside them, and she understood what healing actually meant. It didn't mean forgetting the pain. It didn't mean pretending everything was perfect. It meant learning to hold joy and sorrow in the same heart. It meant building something new from the broken pieces. It meant finding people who knew that silence could be sacred and speaking could be brave, and sometimes the most profound thing you could do was simply listen. Outside, rain started falling against the windows. Soft, steady cleansing. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other in their brokenness sat together in comfortable quiet. And for the first time, in longer than she could remember, Reagan wasn't afraid of the silence. Because silence, she'd learned, wasn't emptiness. It was peace. It was home. It was the sound of healing. And it was beautiful.